I never thought I would end up in a courtroom defending my right to sleep in a tent on my own property. But there I was, watching a judge barely contain his laughter while the HOA president's face turned a shade of crimson I did not think was humanly possible. My name is Harrison Quill, and I own 5 acres of heavily wooded land in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just outside Asheville. I bought the property 3 years ago with money I had saved from working as a software developer in Charlotte. The land came with a small cabin, nothing fancy, just 800 square feet of wood and stone that suited me perfectly. What I loved most about the place was the isolation, the quiet, and the fact that I could finally disconnect from the chaos of city life whenever I wanted. The property was part of a strange hodgepodge development called Mountain Vista Estates. The developer had gone bankrupt halfway through the project back in 2018, leaving behind a mix of finished homes, empty lots, and larger parcels like mine. When I bought the land, I was told there was an HOA, but the paperwork indicated it only had jurisdiction over the common areas, which consisted of a small playground near the entrance and the roads within the development. My attorney reviewed everything before I closed, and he assured me the HOA covenants did not apply to properties over 3 acres. Mine was 5, so I figured I was safe. For the first 2 years, everything was peaceful. I would drive up from Charlotte on weekends, spend time hiking, fishing in the creek that ran through the back of my property, and generally enjoying the solitude. I worked remotely 3 days a week, which gave me the flexibility to spend extended time at the cabin. Life was good. Then Patricia Winters moved into the neighborhood. Patricia was 52 years old, had perfectly coiffed blonde hair that never seemed to move even in strong wind, and wore pastel cardigans like they were some kind of uniform. She had recently divorced her 3rd husband, a detail I only knew because she told everyone within 5 minutes of meeting them, and had decided to dedicate her life to making Mountain Vista Estates the most regulated community in western North Carolina. She got herself elected HOA president within 3 months of moving in, running unopposed because nobody else wanted the job. The previous president, a retired teacher named George, had basically let everyone do whatever they wanted as long as they maintained their properties and paid the minimal annual dues for road maintenance. Patricia had other ideas. I first encountered her on a Saturday morning in early November. I was unloading gear from my truck, preparing for a weekend of maintenance work on the cabin, when a white Lexus SUV pulled into my driveway. Patricia emerged wearing pressed khakis and a pink cardigan, carrying a clipboard like it was a weapon. "Hello there," she called out in a voice that managed to sound both cheerful and threatening. "You must be Harrison. I'm Patricia Winters, HOA president. I wanted to introduce myself and go over a few community guidelines with you." I set down the toolbox I was holding and walked over, trying to be polite. "Nice to meet you, though I should mention my property is not actually subject to the HOA covenants. It is over 3 acres. Her smile tightened. "Oh, I am aware of what your deed says. However, we have been working on updating our bylaws to include all properties within the development boundaries, regardless of size. It is about maintaining community standards." "That is interesting," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "But you cannot retroactively apply new rules to existing property owners without their consent. I did not agree to any HOA governance when I bought this land." Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly. "We will see about that. In the meantime, I wanted to remind you that any exterior modifications to structures require Architectural Review Board approval. I noticed your cabin could use a fresh coat of stain." I looked at my cabin, which was perfectly fine. "It is treated wood, It is supposed to look like that. Nevertheless, we have standards. She made a note on her clipboard. I will be sending you information about our next meeting. I strongly encourage you to attend. She left after that, and I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, I started receiving letters from the HOA. The first one informed me that I needed to submit a landscaping plan for approval. The second one said my truck was not an approved vehicle type for overnight parking. The third one claimed my firewood stack was an eyesore and needed to be removed or concealed. I ignored all of them. I had consulted with my attorney again, and he confirmed that the HOA had no authority over my property. He sent them a cease and desist letter explaining this in clear legal terms. That only made Patricia angrier. December arrived, and with it came my favorite time of year. I had always loved winter camping, the challenge of staying warm, the stark beauty of snow-covered trees, the absolute silence of the woods at night. My property was perfect for it. I had several spots where I liked to set up my tent, each offering different views and experiences. One Friday evening, I arrived at the cabin after work, loaded my backpack with cold-weather camping gear, and hiked about half a mile into my property to a clearing near the creek. The temperature was supposed to drop into the 20s that night, perfect conditions for testing out a new sleeping bag I had bought. I set up my four-season tent, gathered firewood, and settled in for what I knew would be a peaceful weekend. Saturday morning, I woke to the sound of voices. Multiple voices getting closer. I unzipped my tent and stepped out to find Patricia leading a group of 4 people through my woods. They were all wearing matching Mountain Vista Estates HOA vests, which was somehow both ridiculous and infuriating. "What are you doing on my property?" I called out, my breath forming clouds in the cold air. Patricia jumped slightly, clearly not expecting me to be there. Then her surprise turned to something else, a kind of triumphant anger. "We are conducting a community inspection, and I am glad we found this." "Found what?" "My tent." "On my own land. You are camping," she said, as if this was some kind of revelation. "Without a permit." "I do not need a permit to camp on my own property." One of the other HOA members, a man in his 60s whose vest name tag read Dale, shook his head. "Mountain Vista Estates does not allow camping. It is in Section 12 of the revised bylaws." "Revised bylaws that do not apply to me," I said, struggling to keep my temper in check. "And you are all trespassing. I am going to need you to leave. Now." Patricia pulled out her phone and took several pictures of my campsite. "This is a violation. You will be hearing from our attorney." "Get off my property," I said, louder this time. "All of you, right now." They left, but Patricia made sure to take more pictures as they went, documenting my tent, my fire ring, even the clothesline I had strung between 2 trees. I packed up my campsite, furious. When I got back to the cabin, I called my attorney, Michael Harrison. No relation despite the shared first name. I explained what had happened. "They trespassed on your property?" he asked, his tone sharp. "Yes, 5 of them, led by the HOA president." "That is a mistake on their part." "Listen, Harrison, I think we need to be proactive here. This woman is not going to stop. She seems to have fixated on you for some reason. I am going to send another letter, this one more strongly worded, and I am going to make it clear that any further trespassing will result in legal action." "Do it," I said. Michael sent the letter on Monday. By Wednesday, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney, a firm in Asheville. The letter demanded that I immediately cease all camping activities on my property, pay a fine of $500 for violating community standards, and submit to regular property inspections to ensure compliance with HOA regulations. It was absurd. Every single demand was legally baseless. But it was also clear that this was going to escalate. I called Michael again. They are doubling down. I see that. Okay, here is what I recommend. Let them take you to court. They will lose badly, and it will establish once and for all that they have no authority over your property. It might even open them up to a countersuit for harassment. How long will that take? A few months, probably. But Harrison, you have the law on your side here. Your deed is clear. The original HOA covenants are clear. They cannot win this. I agreed to let him handle it. In the meantime, I decided I was not going to let Patricia Winters dictate what I could or could not do on my own land. The next weekend, I went camping again, this time setting up closer to the cabin where I could keep an eye out for trespassers. Sure enough, Saturday afternoon, Patricia showed up with 2 other HOA board members. I was sitting by my campfire, reading a book when I heard them approaching. "This is a direct violation," Patricia announced, her voice shrill. "You were explicitly told to stop camping." I looked up from my book. "And you were explicitly told this is private property and you are trespassing. I have game cameras set up all over this area. You are being recorded right now." That was a bluff. I did not have game cameras, at least not yet, but it worked. Patricia hesitated, glancing around nervously. "This is not over," she said. "You will be served with an injunction." "Great. I will see you in court." They left, and I made a mental note to actually buy some game cameras. The injunction arrived 2 weeks later. The HOA was asking a judge to order me to stop camping on my property, to pay accumulated fines now totaling $1,500, and to submit to HOA authority. The hearing was scheduled for January 15th at the Buncombe County Courthouse. Michael was confident. "This is going to be quick. The judge will take one look at your deed and their baseless claims and throw it out. But be prepared, they might try to argue that winter camping is somehow dangerous or constitutes a nuisance." Dangerous. I am a grown man camping on my own property. I know. But desperate people make desperate arguments. The weeks leading up to the hearing were tense. Patricia escalated her campaign. She started a neighborhood Facebook group and posted long rants about how I was destroying property values and creating a homeless encampment on my land. Several neighbors reached out to me privately to apologize for her behavior and to assure me they supported my right to use my property as I saw fit. One neighbor, an older woman named Helen who lived in a house near the development entrance, even came by with cookies. "That woman is out of control," Helen said. "She tried to fine me for having the wrong color mailbox. The wrong color. I have lived here for 12 years and my mailbox has always been green." "Did you pay the fine?" I asked. "Absolutely not." I told her where she could shove her fine. Helen grinned, though I used more colorful language. The support was nice, but it also highlighted how Patricia was terrorizing the entire neighborhood. This was not just about me anymore. She was on a power trip and someone needed to stop her. January 15th arrived cold and clear. I met Michael at the courthouse at 8:30. He was carrying a thick folder of documents. "I have your deed, the original HOA covenants, the developer's bankruptcy records showing the incomplete nature of the development, photographs proving your property is over 3 acres, and about a dozen other pieces of evidence," he said. "We are going to be fine." The hearing was scheduled for 9. We entered the courtroom to find Patricia sitting at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. Patricia was wearing a navy blue blazer and had her hair pulled back in a tight bun, clearly trying to look professional and serious. The judge was the Honorable Robert Chen, a man in his early 60s with salt and pepper hair and a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. He entered, We all stood, and the hearing began. Patricia's attorney, who introduced himself as Donald Kepler, stood first. Your Honor, we are here today because the defendant, Harrison Quill, has repeatedly and flagrantly violated the Mountain Vista Estates HOA covenants and restrictions. Despite multiple warnings and cease and desist orders from the HOA, Mr. Quill continues to engage in camping activities on his property, which violates community standards and creates a public nuisance. Judge Chen looked at the papers in front of him. Mr. Kepler, I have reviewed the filings. Am I correct that Mr. Quill's property is 5 acres? Yes, Your Honor, but... And am I correct that the original HOA covenants filed with the county in 2017 explicitly state that properties over 3 acres are not subject to HOA governance? Kepler shifted his weight. Your Honor, the HOA has since revised those bylaws without Mr. Quill's consent or agreement. The HOA board voted to expand governance to all properties within the development boundaries. Judge Chen set down the papers and looked directly at Kepler. Mr. Kepler, you are an experienced attorney. You know that an HOA cannot unilaterally impose restrictions on property owners who did not agree to those restrictions at the time of purchase. What exactly is your legal argument here? Kepler cleared his throat. Your Honor, we believe that Mr. Quill's camping activities constitute a nuisance under North Carolina law. The activity is unusual for a residential area. It potentially creates safety hazards, and it negatively impacts surrounding property values. Unusual for a residential area, Judge Chen repeated. He owns 5 acres of wooded land in the mountains. How is camping unusual? It is not traditional residential use, Your Honor. Neither is having a workshop, or a greenhouse, or any number of other activities that property owners engage in on their land. Is there any evidence that Mr. Quill's camping has actually created a safety hazard or damaged anyone's property? Well, no, Your Honor, but is there any evidence that property values have been affected? It is a matter of community standards, Your Honor. Judge Chen leaned back in his chair. Mr. Kepler, I am going to hear from Mr. Quill's attorney now, but I want to be clear that I am not seeing a legal basis for this injunction. Michael stood, and I could tell he was trying not to smile. Your Honor, this is a simple case of an HOA overstepping its legal authority. Mr. Quill purchased his property with a clear understanding that it was not subject to HOA governance. The deed is explicit. The original covenants are explicit. The HOA cannot change the rules retroactively and then try to enforce those new rules on property owners who never agreed to them. I agree, Judge Chen said immediately. Is there anything else? Yes, Your Honor. The HOA has engaged in a pattern of harassment against my client. They have trespassed on his property multiple times. They have sent him threatening letters, and the HOA president has launched a social media campaign to defame him. We are prepared to file a countersuit for harassment and defamation if this continues. Judge Chen turned to Patricia, who had been sitting rigid in her chair. Miss Winters, do you have anything you would like to say? Patricia stood up, even though her attorney tried to wave her back down. Your Honor, this is about maintaining the quality and standards of our community. Mr. Quill is living like a homeless person on his property. He is camping in tents in the middle of winter. It is bizarre behavior and it reflects poorly on all of us. Miss Winters, Judge Chen said, his tone sharp, Mr. Quill is engaging in recreational camping on his own property. There is nothing bizarre about that. What is bizarre is an HOA trying to control what a property owner does on land that is not subject to their governance. But Your Honor, Miss Winters, I am going to stop you right there. Judge Chen picked up the injunction request. This request is denied. Mr. Quill has every right to camp on his own property. The HOA has no authority over his land. Furthermore, I am ordering the HOA to cease all contact with Mr. Quill regarding this matter. Any further attempts to enforce non-existent rules will be considered harassment. Patricia's face went pale, then flushed bright red. This is ridiculous. You are just going to let him turn our neighborhood into a campground. Judge Chen's expression hardened. Miss Winters, you need to sit down and be quiet, or I will hold you in contempt. Your HOA brought a frivolous lawsuit with no legal merit. You have wasted this court's time and your own money. The injunction is denied. Court is adjourned. He stood and left the courtroom, and for a moment there was complete silence. Then Michael turned to me and whispered, "That went even better than I expected." Patricia grabbed her attorney's arm. "We can appeal this, right?" Kepler pulled his arm free and started packing his briefcase. "Miss Winters, I told you before we came here that this case had no merit. You insisted on proceeding. I will be sending the HOA a final bill, and I strongly suggest you do not contact me again." He left, leaving Patricia standing there, furious and humiliated. She turned to me, her eyes blazing. "This is not over, Mr. Quill." Michael stepped between us. "Actually, it is. And if you contact my client again, we will be filing for a restraining order and a lawsuit for harassment. Have a good day, Miss Winters." We left the courthouse, and I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. "That was incredible," I said. "The judge saw right through them," Michael said. "But Harrison, I meant what I said in there. If she contacts you again, call me immediately, document everything. We might need to take further action." I nodded, hoping it would not come to that. For a few weeks, things were quiet. I went back to my normal routine, spending weekends at the cabin, camping when I felt like it. I bought those game cameras and set them up around my property, just in case. I also put up some no trespassing signs at the property line, making it crystal clear where Patricia's authority ended. But of course, Patricia could not let it go. In early February, I received a notice from Buncombe County Code Enforcement. Someone had filed a complaint claiming I was operating an illegal campground on my property. The county wanted to send an inspector out to investigate. I called Michael immediately. "She is going after me through the county now." "That is harassment," Michael said, "but we need to let the county do their inspection. You are not operating a campground, so you have nothing to worry about. Just be cooperative with the inspector and document everything." The inspector, a tired-looking man named Frank Domings, showed up on a Thursday afternoon. I met him at the cabin and showed him around. "So what is this complaint about?" I asked. Frank pulled out a paper. "Complaint says you are running a commercial campground without proper permits or licenses. They say you have multiple campsites, you are advertising online, and you are accepting payment from campers." I stared at him. "That is completely false. I camp here myself, for personal recreation. I have never had anyone else camp here. I do not advertise anything. This is my private property." Frank looked around at the quiet woods, the single small cabin, the obvious lack of any commercial activity. "Yeah, I am not seeing any evidence of a campground. Do you mind if I walk around a bit?" "Go ahead." He spent about 30 minutes exploring the property, taking notes and photographs. When he came back, he shook his head. "Mr. Quill, this complaint is bogus. You clearly are not running a campground. You might have a personal campsite or two, but that is not a code violation. You are allowed to camp on your own property. So I am clear, completely. I will file a report saying the complaint was unfounded, and between you and me, whoever filed this wasted everyone's time." "I know exactly who filed it," I said. Frank gave me a knowing look. "HOA." "How did you guess?" "Because about half the complaints we get are from HOAs with nothing better to do. We have one neighborhood where the HOA president calls us every week about something. It has gotten to the point where we barely respond anymore, unless there is a legitimate safety issue. After Frank left, I called Michael and told him what had happened. "That is it," Michael said. "We are filing a harassment lawsuit. She has crossed the line. Filing false complaints with the county is actionable. This is malicious." "Do it," I said. I was done being patient. Michael filed the lawsuit the following week. We sued Patricia Winters personally, not the HOA, because her actions had gone beyond her role as HOA president. We were asking for damages for harassment, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and legal fees. Patricia was served with the lawsuit on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, she had started calling my phone and leaving angry voicemails. By Thursday, she was posting about me on the neighborhood Facebook group again, calling me a bully and claiming I was trying to destroy the HOA. Every voicemail, every social media post, every piece of communication was more evidence for our case. Michael was delighted. "She is digging her own grave," he said. "Just keep documenting and do not respond to any of it." The lawsuit was scheduled for mediation in March, a standard step before trial. Patricia showed up with a new attorney, a woman named Judith Parsons who looked deeply unhappy to be there. We all sat in a conference room with a mediator, a retired judge named Harold Stedman. Harold reviewed the case file and then looked at Patricia. "Miss Winters, I am going to be blunt. You do not have a defense here. You have harassed Mr. Quill, you filed false complaints with the county, and you have engaged in defamation. The evidence is overwhelming. My recommendation is that you settle this case today." Patricia crossed her arms. "I was protecting my community." "By lying to code enforcement?" Harold asked. "By trespassing on private property? By trying to enforce rules that do not exist? Miss Winters, you are not protecting anyone. You are engaged in a personal vendetta." "He is camping in the middle of winter like a vagrant," Patricia said. "It is not normal. Miss Winters, what Mr. Quill does on his own property is none of your business. He is not violating any laws. He is not harming anyone. You need to leave him alone." Judith, Patricia's attorney, leaned over and whispered something to her. Patricia shook her head violently. "No, I am not apologizing to him. I did nothing wrong." Harold sighed. "Okay, then we are going to trial, but I am warning you, Miss Winters, you are going to lose. And when you lose, you are going to pay Mr. Quill's legal fees on top of any damages the jury awards him. You could be looking at $50,000 or more." Patricia went pale. "50,000 or more. Juries do not like bullies, Miss Winters. And that is exactly what you are going to look like in court." We broke for a private caucus. Michael and I went to a separate conference room, and Harold came with us. "She is going to crack," Harold said. "Give her an hour to think about what $50,000 means and she will settle." He was right. An hour later, Patricia agreed to a settlement. She would pay me $20,000 for damages and legal fees. She would issue a written apology. She would resign as HOA president. And she would sign a binding agreement to never contact me again or interfere with my use of my property. Any violation of the agreement would result in automatic additional damages of $10,000. Michael drafted the settlement agreement right there, and everyone signed it. Patricia looked like she had aged 10 years in the course of the day. She would not look at me as she signed the papers. As we were leaving, Judith pulled Michael aside. "For what it is worth, I told her from the start that this was a bad idea. Some people just cannot let things go." "I appreciate that," Michael said. I drove back to Charlotte that evening feeling vindicated but also exhausted. The whole ordeal had taken months and had cost me time, money, and peace of mind. But it was over now. Patricia was out of my life, and I could finally enjoy my property in peace. The $20,000 arrived in my account 2 weeks later. I used some of it to pay Michael's bill, and I put the rest toward improvements to the cabin, including a new wood stove and better insulation. Spring came, and with it came changes to Mountain Vista Estates. Patricia resigned as HOA president as required by the settlement, and the neighborhood held a special election. Helen, the woman with the green mailbox, was elected as the new president. Her first act was to rescind all of Patricia's ridiculous new rules and to go back to the original, much more reasonable covenants. I ran into Helen at the small general store near the development one Saturday morning. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "You standing up to Patricia gave the rest of us the courage to push back. She had been making everyone miserable." "I am just glad it is over," I said. "We all are. And just so you know, you are welcome at the neighborhood barbecue in June. We want to make sure you know you are part of the community, even if your property is not technically under HOA rules." I smiled. "I appreciate that. I will be there." Summer arrived, and I spent more time at the cabin. I took vacation days from work and would sometimes stay for a week at a time, working remotely during the day and camping at night. The property was beautiful in the summer, lush and green, full of birds and wildlife. I even started inviting friends up to visit. My buddy Jake from Charlotte came up for a weekend, and we went camping together like we used to do in college. We sat around the campfire, drank beer, and talked about how insane the whole situation with Patricia had been. "I cannot believe she tried to tell you that you could not camp on your own land," Jake said. "That is some next-level crazy." "I know, but at least it is over now." "Do you ever see her around?" "No. I heard she moved out of the neighborhood a few months ago, sold her house and left." Good riddance. One evening in July, I was sitting on the cabin porch watching the sunset when I saw someone walking up the driveway. It was Dale, one of the HOA board members who had been with Patricia that day she found me camping. I tensed, wondering if there was going to be more trouble. But Dale held up his hands as he approached. "I come in peace, I promise. I just wanted to apologize for what happened last winter. I let Patricia talk me into things I should have known better than to do. Trespassing on your property, trying to enforce rules that did not exist, all of it. I am sorry." I relaxed a little. "I appreciate that, Dale. That took guts to come here and say. I should have done it months ago. Patricia had this way of making everything sound reasonable in the moment, you know, but looking back, we were way out of line. Anyway, I wanted you to know that the rest of the board, we are not like that. Helen is doing a great job, and we are trying to actually help the neighborhood, not control everyone." "That is good to hear," Dale nodded. "Also, if you ever need anything, let me know. I do electrical work, and I noticed your porch light is flickering. I would be happy to take a look at it, free of charge, as a way of making amends. You do not have to do that, but I appreciate the offer. Actually, yeah, the wiring in the cabin is pretty old. If you have time sometime, I would love a professional opinion on whether anything needs to be updated." Dale came back the following weekend and spent a few hours inspecting the cabin's electrical system. He found a few issues, nothing major, and offered to fix them at cost. We ended up becoming friendly, not quite friends, but on good terms. It was a reminder that most people in the neighborhood were decent, and Patricia had been the outlier. By August, I had nearly forgotten about the whole incident. I was spending a long weekend at the cabin, and I decided to go camping again, this time backpacking deeper into my property to a spot I had not visited in a while. It was a small ridge with a great view of the valley below, and I wanted to watch the sunrise from there. I packed my gear and hiked out Friday evening, setting up camp just before dark. The weather was perfect, warm but not too hot, with a clear sky full of stars. I made a small fire, cooked dinner, and sat there feeling completely at peace. The next morning, I woke before dawn and climbed to the top of the ridge. I sat on a flat rock and watched as the sun came up over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was one of those moments where you feel completely connected to the world, where all the stress and noise of modern life just falls away. As I sat there, I thought about how close I had come to giving up the cabin, to selling the property and walking away rather than fighting Patricia and the HOA. It would have been easier, certainly less stressful, but I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. This place was mine, truly mine, and I had fought to keep it that way. When I got back to the cabin Sunday afternoon, there was a letter in my mailbox. For a moment, I felt a flash of anxiety, worried that it was another HOA complaint or legal notice. But when I opened it, I found a handwritten note from Helen. Harrison, I wanted to let you know that the HOA board voted unanimously to formally recognize that your property is exempt from HOA governance. We have updated all our records and filed a new declaration with the county making this explicit. You should not have any more issues going forward. Also, thank you again for standing up to Patricia. You did all of us a favor. Best, Helen. I put the letter on my kitchen counter and smiled. It really was over. Fall came, and with it came some of the best camping weather of the year. The leaves turned brilliant shades of red and gold, and the temperatures dropped into the comfortable range for hiking and campfires. I spent nearly every weekend at the cabin, often camping 2 or 3 nights in a row. In October, I got a call from Michael. I thought you would want to know. Patricia Winters filed for bankruptcy last month. I saw the notice in the legal announcements. Seriously? Yeah. I am guessing the $20,000 she paid you, plus her legal fees, plus the loss on her house when she sold, it all added up. She is also apparently being sued by several other people in your neighborhood for various things. She really burned a lot of bridges. I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me felt bad for her, despite everything she had put me through. But mostly, I just felt relieved that she was no longer in a position to cause problems for anyone. Well, I hope she gets the help she needs, I said. But I am glad she is not my problem anymore. Agreed. Anyway, I just thought you should know. Take care, Harrison. November arrived, and with it came the anniversary of when this whole mess had started. I decided to mark the occasion by going camping, the same type of winter camping that had triggered Patricia's initial meltdown. The forecast called for temperatures in the low 20s. Perfect. I packed my cold weather gear and hiked out to the same clearing near the creek where Patricia had found me that morning a year ago. I set up my tent, built a fire, and settled in for the night. As I sat there, wrapped in a warm jacket and watching the flames dance, I thought about everything that had happened. I had learned a lot over the past year. I had learned about property rights and HOA law, about standing up for myself, about the importance of good neighbors. I had also learned that some people, like Patricia, are so invested in control and power that they will destroy themselves trying to exert it over others. But mostly, I had learned that this land, this cabin, this life I had built here, was worth fighting for. The next morning, I woke to find a light dusting of snow on the ground, the first of the season. I made coffee over the campfire and watched the sun rise through the bare trees. Everything was quiet except for the crackling of the fire and the distant sound of the creek. I spent the whole weekend out there, 3 nights under the stars, and it was perfect. No one bothered me. No one told me I could not be there. No one questioned my choices or tried to impose their standards on me. I was free on my own land, doing exactly what I wanted to do. When I packed up and hiked back to the cabin Monday morning, I saw Dale driving by on the road. He slowed down and rolled down his window. "Winter camping again," he called out, grinning. "You know it," I said. "You are crazy, man, but in a good way. Have a good week." "You too, Dale." I loaded my gear into the truck and drove back to Charlotte, already planning my next camping trip. The whole Patricia situation had become something of a legend in the neighborhood, a cautionary tale about HOA overreach and one man's stubborn refusal to back down. People would bring it up at neighborhood gatherings, usually with a mix of amusement and relief. At the June barbecue Helen had invited me to, several neighbors had approached me to hear the story firsthand. I downplayed my role, but they all seemed to see me as some kind of folk hero, the guy who had stood up to the tyrant, and one neighbor, a younger guy named Marcus who had moved in just after Patricia left, was particularly interested. "Man, I wish I had been here to see it. I heard she literally got laughed out of court." "The judge definitely was not impressed with her case," I said diplomatically. "Helen told me you sued her and won 20 grand. Is that true?" We settled, "But yeah, that is accurate." Marcus shook his head in admiration. "Good for you, man. People like that need to be put in their place." As the year went on, I settled into a comfortable routine. I worked my job in Charlotte during the week, taking advantage of the remote work flexibility to occasionally work from the cabin. On weekends and vacation days, I was in the mountains, camping, hiking, fishing, and generally living the life I had always wanted. I made improvements to the property, adding a small shed for storage, improving the trails, even building a proper fire pit near the cabin. Every improvement felt like a small victory, a way of claiming the land and making it more fully mine. In December, on the 1-year anniversary of the court hearing, I received a holiday card from Helen. Inside, along with the usual season's greetings, she had written a personal note. "Thank you for your patience and courage this past year. You reminded all of us what property rights really mean. Wishing you many more peaceful camping trips on your beautiful land." I put the card on my mantel, next to a photograph of the sunrise I had taken from the ridge last summer. Both were reminders of what I had fought for and why it mattered. That Christmas, I invited my parents up to the cabin for the first time. My dad, Harold Quill Sr., was a retired engineer who had always encouraged my independent streak. He walked around the property with undisguised pride. "You have built something good here, son," he said. "A lot of men would have caved to that HOA pressure. You stood your ground." "I learned it from you, Dad." "Maybe so, but you are the one who did it. I am proud of you." We spent the holiday there, my parents, my sister Felicity, Dale, and her husband, all of us gathered in the small cabin. It was crowded but warm, and on Christmas night, I convinced everyone to go camping with me, just for a few hours. We set up a big tent, built a fire, and sat around talking and laughing while snow fell gently around us. "This is crazy," my sister said, but she was smiling. "Camping on Christmas night? You are insane, Harrison." "Maybe," I said, "but it is my kind of insane." We packed up and went back to the cabin before it got too late, but those few hours around the campfire became one of my favorite memories. As January arrived and a new year began, I realized that the whole experience with Patricia and the HOA, as stressful as it had been, had actually made my relationship with the property stronger. I appreciated it more, valued it more, understood more clearly why it mattered. The legal battle had forced me to articulate and defend what this place meant to me, and in doing so, I had come to understand it more deeply. On January 15th, the exact anniversary of the court hearing, I was at the cabin. It was a Wednesday, and I had taken the day off work specifically to mark the occasion. I went camping, naturally hiking out to a new spot I had been wanting to explore. I set up my tent in the afternoon and spent the evening by the fire, thinking about Judge Chen's face when he denied the injunction, about Patricia's humiliation, about the relief I had felt walking out of that courtroom. It had been one of the best days of my life, strange as that sounded. Not because I enjoyed conflict or took pleasure in someone else's downfall, but because it had been a moment of clarity, a moment when justice had prevailed, and the law had protected my rights exactly as it was supposed to. I stayed out there for 2 nights, enjoying the solitude and the cold winter air. When I finally packed up and headed back to the cabin, I felt renewed, ready for whatever the year ahead might bring. The rest of the winter passed peacefully. I continued my routine of weekend camping trips, each one a small assertion of my freedom and my rights. I took photographs of my campsites and posted them occasionally on social media, not to antagonize anyone, but simply to share something I loved. A few of my friends started asking if they could come camping with me, and I began hosting small groups, showing them the property and teaching them cold weather camping skills. In March, I got an unexpected call from a reporter at the Asheville Citizen-Times. She had somehow heard about the case and wanted to do a story about HOA overreach. I was hesitant at first, not wanting to reopen old wounds, but Michael convinced me it might be a good idea. It could help other property owners who are facing similar situations, he said. Your case set a good precedent. Sharing the story might empower others to stand up for their rights. I agreed to the interview, and the resulting article ran in the Sunday paper in mid-March. It was titled, "Mountain Property Owner Defeats HOA in Battle Over Camping Rights." The reporter did a good job telling the story fairly, including quotes from me, Michael, and even Helen, who spoke about how the neighborhood had moved on from Patricia's reign of terror. The article generated a surprising amount of attention. I received emails from property owners around North Carolina and even other states, people dealing with overbearing HOAs and looking for advice. I directed them all to Michael, who was happy to consult on property rights cases. One email particularly stood out. It was from a man in Colorado who owned mountain property and was facing a similar situation with his HOA trying to restrict his camping and outdoor activities. He had been considering selling the property rather than fighting, but after reading my story, he decided to hire an attorney and stand his ground. "You inspired me to fight back," he wrote. "I realized that if I give in, I am not just giving up my property rights, I am setting a precedent that lets these HOAs push everyone around. Thank you for sharing your story." I wrote back wishing him luck, and over the following months, we exchanged occasional updates. He eventually won his case too, and his HOA was forced to acknowledge that they had no authority over his property. By the time summer rolled around again, the Patricia incident had become fully integrated into the history of Mountain Vista Estates. New residents would hear the story and express disbelief that an HOA had tried to ban camping on private property. The annual neighborhood barbecue, which I attended again that June, had a new tradition. Someone would inevitably toast to property rights at some point in the evening, and everyone would laugh and raise their glasses. I had become an unexpected symbol of something larger than myself, a reminder that individuals could stand up to institutional overreach and win. It was not a role I had sought, but I accepted it, and I tried to use whatever small platform I had to encourage others to know their rights and defend them. As the second anniversary of the initial confrontation approached, I reflected on how much had changed. The neighborhood was healthier, with an HOA that actually served its members rather than ruling over them. My relationship with my property had deepened. I had made new friends and strengthened old relationships. And I had learned that sometimes, standing your ground and fighting for what is right, even when it is difficult and exhausting, is absolutely worth it. I continued camping through that second winter and beyond, each trip a quiet celebration of freedom. The land that I had fought so hard to keep remained mine, not just legally, but in every way that mattered. I knew every trail, every clearing, every bend in the creek. I knew where the best campsites were for each season, where to find firewood, where to watch the sunset. And I knew with absolute certainty that no HOA president, no matter how determined or unreasonable, could ever take that away from me again. The judge had laughed them out of court, the settlement had been paid, and my rights were secure. I was free to camp, to explore, to live on my own land exactly as I chose. That was all I had ever wanted, and it was everything I needed. On a cold February evening, almost exactly 2 years after the mediation where Patricia had signed the settlement, I was camping near the creek when I heard footsteps. My first instinct was alarm, memories of Patricia's trespassing flooding back. But then, I heard Helen's voice calling out. "Harrison, are you out here? I am sorry to bother you, but I wanted to catch you before you left for the week." I emerged from my tent. "Helen, is everything okay?" She smiled apologetically. "Everything is fine. I just wanted to deliver this in person." She handed me an envelope. "The HOA board voted to give you an award at the annual meeting next month. It is a recognition for standing up for property rights and reminding us all what our community should really be about. I hope you will come accept it." I opened the envelope and found a certificate naming me Defender of Property Rights, Mountain Vista Estates. It was surprisingly touching. "I will be there," I said. "Thank you, Helen." "No, thank you. You changed this place for the better, Harrison, whether you meant to or not." She left, and I went back to my campsite, the certificate carefully tucked into my backpack. As I sat by the fire that night, I thought about journeys and destinations, about fights worth fighting and battles worth winning. I thought about cold winter nights under the stars, about lawyers and judges and the rule of law. I thought about community and independence, about standing alone and finding unexpected allies. Most of all, I thought about home, and how this place, these 5 acres of mountain woods, had become more mine through the struggle to keep it than it ever would have been without that fight. Patricia Winters had tried to take something from me, but in the end, she had given me something far more valuable. Absolute certainty that this land was mine, earned and defended, and forever protected. The fire crackled, the creek burbled in the distance, and overhead, the stars shone clear and bright in the winter sky. I was exactly where I belonged, doing exactly what I wanted to do, on land that was unquestionably, legally, and completely my own. And that, I thought as I settled into my sleeping bag for the night, was worth every moment of the fight.